Welcome all to this presentation tackling the evolution of coaching. This is a project designed for elite level coaches within football and will cover several pertinent topics that look to interlink and underpin an emerging philosophy surrounding athlete-centered coaching. Firstly, the importance of learning environments will be considered, with specific reference to the theories of behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism, mainly discussing how the latter encourages the notion of athletes at the heart of coaching. Following this, the coach-athlete relationship will be analysed and further linked to the principles of constructivism, with suggestions made around how the structuring of dyads can positively impact learning over performance. The natural progression after this will be to demonstrate how motivation is influenced by the coach-athlete dynamic, with the aim of emphasising the quality of internal motivation for athletes over external. Finally, these three topics will be summarised and interwoven with the concept of athlete-centred learning, where all of the coaching theories, philosophies and knowledge should combine to create a clear message: athletes are the heart of coaching. This presentation will help coaches identify the difference between performance and learning, aid in understanding the pedagogical influence on athletes, and will look to shine a light on some of the problems in coaching. Coaching should look to individuality as a core foundation that underpins practice and recognise the vital nature of coaching holistically. It should be noted, however, before fully commencing with the presentation, that this study acknowledges the work of Jungren, Albeck and Stambolova in 2018, who recognised that coaching is complex, dynamic and often performed in unpredictable contexts, suggesting that coaching is not objective and there is never one universally true answer. This presentation further recognises the difficulties coaches face when attempting to change, as Dennison, Mills and Conoval noted in 2015 that coaches can be so tied to certain ways of thinking that they may perceive themselves to have thought outside the box whilst never actually leaving it. Despite this study stands as a stepping stone on the journey to shifting coaches towards a future where both learning and athletes are centerpieces in practice. Begin, the notion of coaches and the learning environments they develop will be addressed. As seen on the slide, a coach learning framework pyramid has been designed to represent each theory from most athlete-centered to least. Of the three theories, constructivism has been clearly identified as the optimum when viewed through the pedagogical lens of athlete-centered learning. Constructivism refers to perspectives on human learning that reject the notion of the existence of an objective reality, viewing learning as an interpretive process shaped by previous experience through which we construct our own particular versions of reality. Davis, Sumara and Luz Kepler, 2000. This theory proposes that knowledge and learning is constructed from within the performer through deliberate play, Berry, Athena and Cott in 2008, instead of deliberate practice, Baker, Cott and Deakin in 2005, essentially stating that athletes are more inclined to be intrinsically motivated to perform and express themselves in a creative, free-flowing scenario rather than partaking in highly structured and less enjoyable environments. Constructivism can be further broken down into two subsections: social and cognitive constructivism. Cognitive constructivism speaks to the idea that athletes confront challenges or new situations through the knowledge already gained by personal experiences, encouraging players to challenge situations using their own problem-solving tools instead of a reliance on a coach. Social constructivism instead encourages athlete-to-athlete problem-solving, where group dialogue and social interaction help inform long-term learning. A relevant example of these theories being performed in football could be taking a player and swapping their position without any coach-provided context, encouraging them to tackle new scenarios alone instead of being guided by someone else. With social constructivism, 3 attackers versus 3 defender drills would encourage specific and game-related dialogue between relevant positions on the pitch, allowing for realism and independent learning. The principles of constructivism encouraging athlete-centered coaching are only further emphasised when covered with Maggio and Valorin in 2003's Coach Autonomy Support. According to further work from Cho and Bayek in 2020, this concept refers to coaches displaying attitudes and behaviours that show they value athletes' self-initiation and involvement in independent problem-solving and decision-making, and includes coaches' social support, positive feedback and decision-making. This support has been reported to promote athletes' positive motivation and meet their needs for competence and relatedness with others. By combining these two theories, coaches transform into a supplement for long-term, effective and independent athlete learning, instead of remaining the main source from which athletes gain any knowledge from. Especially at the elite level, which is who this presentation is aimed at, coaches can afford to create player-led environments and provide creative freedom, which at the highest level may be the slight difference in margin between the best football players there is. When comparing constructivism and coach autonomy support to the two other frameworks shown in the pyramid, the differences in learning techniques and player understanding are only underlined even further. Whilst constructivism builds off of some cognitivism's principles, the latter fails to provide athletes with enough individuality and fails to acknowledge the unpredictable variations in sport. Constructivism also opposes the ideals of behaviorism, which Moe in 2005 described as an attempt to turn psychology into a strictly defined science by classical and operant conditioning, and through the measurement of behaviour that was overtly observational, placing undue significance on stimuli and responses, while simultaneously ignoring what was going on between those two stages. Operant conditioning has been at the forefront of coaching for a majority of the 20th century, Nelson et al. In 2012, and has encouraged athlete behaviours to be shaped by environments and modified by consequences, not by people. Coaches become the sole transmitters of knowledge by coaching through positive and negative reinforcement or punishment, and by doing this, encourages players to be passive receivers of knowledge. Examples of this in football may be selecting specific players based off of compliant behaviour, or punishing players by giving them extra workload. The ideals of behaviourism have consequently left a void, a so-called black box, between stimulus and response, encouraging the notion of cognitism to aid in controlling this noted area through a blocked practice training method. This learning technique encourages coaches to remain the transmitters of knowledge as they manage an input process of step-by-step movements. For example, several players are practicing the same inside foot passing technique. This method is detached from the environmental context of game-related scenarios, pushing players to develop a consistent movement that may not always be achievable or the correct response. What constructivism achieves that both cognitism and behaviourism cannot is that it acknowledges the randomness of sport and recognises in some circumstances that the athletes are capable of producing their own answers to problems. Coaches should look to deploy random practice frequently to allow for more errors which aid in bolstering memory and self-produced techniques, which are higher quality ways to learn than from an external source. Coach-athlete relationships have been defined by Jowett and Untermanis in 2004 as unique interpersonal relationships in which coaches and athletes' emotions, thoughts and behaviours are mutually and causally interconnected. Jowett further proceeds to view these dyads through a 3C+1 theoretical framework, which categorises the relationship into 4 subsections: closeness, complementarity, commitment and co-orientation. When considering the coach-athlete relationship and its implications on sport, coaches must also acknowledge the concept of attachment and its impact on learning and performance. Carr in 2010 noted that the coach-athlete dyad should be considered as an attachment bond, achieved through subliminal priming and activating when that attachment is threatened. These threats can take many forms, including other prominent relationships with players or staff, injury, and selection choices revolving around the squad. The 4 Cs presented by Jowett can be used as context demonstrating how performers can become connected with coaches and aid in highlighting athletes' perceptions of these attachment styles. Further work conducted by Jowett alongside Davis in 2010 suggested athletes view these relationships as a safe haven and secure base from which to express themselves from. As coaches, it is important to understand athletes and their thoughts and feelings regarding relationships. Yet, it can be argued that it's even more vital for coaches to actively acknowledge and continuously question the role they play themselves. When combining the coach-athlete relationship with the principles of constructivism, coaches will begin to see their role as a complementary and therefore supportive of athlete problem solving for themselves, whether that be cognitive or social. Chan et al. In 2018 noted that by coaches sacrificing the power that is stereotypically associated to their role and allowing players to form dependable bonds between each other, this has demonstrated reduction in anxiety, increases in motivation, and promotes player-driven learning. Athletes must be recognised as the driving force behind their own learning, and by creating a sense of equality and unity within a dyad through encouraging communication and self-taught learning, the likelihood of athletes perceiving their coaches negatively, experiencing pressure through the dominance of the coaching role, and the notion of coaches holding a power of the athlete are all lowered significantly. Goffiner and Horn in 2020. Research conducted by Froyen, Pensgaard and Gustafsson in 2020 only further demonstrates the benefits of a player-driven coach-athlete relationship, reporting that athletes with a high level of perceived control have been shown to display key factors in relation to experiencing and coping with stress, developing sustainable coping mechanisms, and lessening the importance of variables such as gender. Jowett in 2008 noted that within the context of sport and exercise, motivation as a general psychological concept has been researched extensively and systematically for over 2 decades. This presentation will shine light upon the deployment of the achievement goal theory in sport, with a specific mention of motivational climates and how coaches can directly impact them through their behaviour. Motivational climates are defined by Dada in 2001 as psychological environments in sport where the coach's actions influence how they structure their environment. According to Morgan in 2016, many aspects of the motivational climate fostered by PE teachers and sport coaches are pedagogical and sociological in nature, with emphasis placed on 2 key achievement goals: mastery and performance. Perceptions of a mastery climate, where significance is placed on learning, demonstration of ability relative to self-reference criteria, and understanding failure when attempting to master as a motivator, were shown to be associated with positive motivational responses, such as beliefs that success was dependent on effort, high levels of satisfaction and enjoyment, choice of challenging tasks, intrinsic motivation, and lower levels of boredom. Carpenter and Morgan in 1999. Perceptions of a performance climate, however, where emphasis instead placed on performance and demonstrating one's ability through superior performance over others, were related to a belief that success was dependent on ability, a choice of less challenging tasks, higher levels of boredom, lower levels of enjoyment and satisfaction, and a greater likelihood of cheating and unethical behaviours due to a win-at-all-costs attitude. Kvassner and Roberts in 2001. Creating a mastery climate aligns perfectly alongside the theory of constructivism and the principles noted around coach-athlete relationships, but the real importance lies in how coaches' behaviour aids in creating these environments. According to pertinent research conducted by Epstein in 1988, the pedagogical structure of targets, task, authority, recognition, grouping, evaluation, and time allow coaches to directly impact motivational climates. Task refers to the shared goal and variety within activity. Authority emphasises decision-making and leadership opportunities for players. Recognition speaks to the notion of individual progress and developing caring relationships with athletes. Grouping ensures athletes are in a cooperative environment. Evaluation allows individuals to self-reference and progress and effort. And finally, time allows for a flexible time frame in which to learn in. Relating the notion of targets back to a footballing context, research from Kingston, Wixie and Morgan in 2018 studies the implementation of this framework within a footballing environment. Results demonstrated that for using each of the 6 ideals presented by targets, athletes felt continually challenged but never compared, coaches only intervened 3 times and encouraged athlete-driven learning, never criticised the long ball, whether it was successful or not, grouped individuals correctly, and ensured no time constraints, meaning athletes have ample time to learn and make decisions. It is vital to note, however, that individuality must remain a core facet of both coaching and athlete-driven learning, as not all performers will respond to probes in the same way. Consequently, the environment must be tailored to individuals for the greatest benefit. Reflecting practically on this presentation, constructivism, the coach-athlete relationship, and motivation have all been utilised to underpin and inform the notion of athlete-centred learning. Pearl in 2018 described athlete-centred coaching as defined by a style of coaching that promotes athlete learning through athlete ownership, responsibility, initiative, and awareness, all of which is guided by the coach. When athletes are not placed at the heart of coaching, research has suggested psychologically that their mood and self-esteem lowers, motivation decreases, enjoyment reduces, and an increase in anxiety levels. Coaches must understand now that their impact on athlete-centred learning stems from the value of their role to athletes as more than the boundaries of just a pedagogue and extends into people, friendships, and teachers. Again, this is where the coach-athlete relationship further underpins the athlete-centred coaching style and further links into the conversation surrounding motivation with humanistic and holistic style practices at the heart of what they do. The benefits of an athlete-based approach are more significant when compared alongside a command-based approach, much like a lot of the language used throughout this presentation, which further demonstrate how these subsections interlink and underpin the notion of athlete-centred learning. Players become in control of their own learning. Skills are learned within a game context. Problem-solving stems from the player rather than a prescription from the coach, and the coach's role doesn't become redundant, but instead guides athletes for a shift in responsibility. A command-based approach, much like earlier talking points such as behaviorism, ensures athletes are passive followers of coaches' instructions, with the latter as the sole sources of knowledge and taking on a majority of the tasks needed to learn. To ensure that an athlete-based approach is adopted when coaching, Bunker and Thorpe's theoretical model of teaching games for understanding from 1982 should be applied. As seen on the slide, the learner acts as a centre point for a 6-step rationale designed to provide learning experiences for individuals to acquire tactical skills and readdress the notion of why before how. Not only that, it places a further emphasis on skill execution, enables participants to learn whilst doing, and allows athletes to create games. Whilst a constraints-based theoretical model may have been considered, the coach remains the focal point and wielder of power in that model, meaning nothing has actually changed. This presentation has brought the philosophy of athlete-driven coaching to the forefront of pedagogy in football. The theory of constructivism was discussed and how through a combination of social and cognitive constructivism coupled with coach autonomy support can create an environment where athletes have the creative freedom to develop for themselves and places an emphasis on learning instead of performance. These theories were selected over behaviorism and cognitivism, which place too much power and prominence on the coach through elements like control and external motivators. Following this presentation demonstrates how the coach-athlete relationship can complement the notion of constructivism, given context through Jarrett's 3C+1 model, shifting the stereotypical paradigm of a teacher-student dynamic and allowing athletes to take centre stage whilst coaches adopt a supportive complementary role encourages long-term, high-quality learning that athletes will enjoy and want to continue. This led perfectly into motivation, where the achievement goal theory was discussed and mastery motivational climates were identified as optimum in the attempt for athlete-centred learning. Coaches were taught the target framework and demonstrated its success within a pertinent football environment, reinforcing the benefits of this coaching style. Finally, the notion of athlete-centred coaching was fully considered and the teaching teaching games for understanding model only further acknowledged athletes as their own best teachers. It is evident learning that has steered away from a reliance on coach-orientated practice and now looks to create self-motivated, self-sustaining learners. Especially as elite coaches, it must be recognised that athletes are of higher ability and therefore have the skill set required to meet these learning environments. Whilst helping to teach foundation level skills will potentially be better suited by a behaviourist or cognitivist stance, elite level performers have already established these foundations and require a deeper, more sustainable form of learning.